everyone, it's me Rox. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be quite a long video. It's going to be a story time video, so if you don't want to listen to me talk for about like 30 minutes straight, you might want to refer or watch one of my other videos. But I swear I am quite entertaining if I do say so myself. This is going to be a video on my very first labor and delivery story. So the day before I delivered, I was quite active. I was preparing the house because I knew that I wouldn't be able to really get things done around the house once I delivered because I would be recovering, or so I thought. Anyway, so the day I delivered was June 10th, and I wasn't expected to deliver till June 12th, but on the 9th, I decided to just go around and clean everything up around the house and do what I wanted. So I think during the afternoon, I had some bloody show, or so what I thought was bloody show. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess, my body's preparing myself for delivery. And I text my sister who's had a child and I was like, oh, I have some bloody show. And she's like, okay, are you feeling okay? Do you feel any pain or anything? And I wasn't really in any pain that I felt was not tolerable. But I don't know if I was also like blocking my thoughts from thinking I was in pain or I was going to be delivering, because I did have an exam coming up that Thursday for graduation. So I was kind of like,
hey baby, like stay in there till I'm done with my exam. But
anyway, I was hoping she was going to come late, but that wasn't the case. So yeah, so I get some bloody show. Then I tried to just relax a little bit more than moving around too much because I was just kind of freaked out and I didn't want to like induce my own labor. I go on throughout the day and I start to notice later at night that my mucus plug came out, and that was the very first time I experienced that. So I know the mucus plug can come out weeks before delivery and a few days before delivery, whatever. But I was positive for GBS. So I was worried because I didn't know if any of those things, like the mucus plug removal, was going to affect baby. So I decided to call the medical hotline for my insurance because I didn't have the number to my OB and they were closed, so I couldn't even get in touch with the medical hotline through them. But I didn't want to go to the hospital because I didn't think it was necessary. I wasn't in any pain, but I was concerned more so about the mucus plug and baby getting an infection or whatever. So I called the hotline and it's RNs who answer the line. So he asked me some questions and I think he was unsure. So he's like, I think it's just safe that you go to the hospital and they can give you their recommendations from there because you don't have a number to your OB. So I'm like, okay, sure. After an hour, me and my husband were like getting ourselves ready and I wasn't in any pain. We already had like our bags packed and everything, but for ourselves, like just freshening up and stuff like that, because we had a good feeling that we were going to be staying at the hospital. Like we wouldn't have to come back home. So we freshened ourselves up. It's about an hour. I'm not gonna lie, I was doing my eyelashes. I was putting eyelash clusters on because I wanted to look cute for my photos. My sister comes into the room and she's all like, are you going to the hospital? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just finishing my eyelashes because like one side was done, the other wasn't. And don't judge me, I already had like one side done. I was trying to finish up the other side, but I decided to call the medical hotline. That's the reason why. I was like, I need to finish this because it's going to look really jank because the other side's not done. Anyway, yeah. And I was trying to calm myself down. So we finally make our way to the hospital, which I recorded that for you guys. And my husband and I didn't know what the protocol was for the hospital. It's mind you, COVID-19, so protocols are a little different. We didn't know the protocol for the hospital because we didn't do a hospital visit prior to, or a hospital tour prior to delivery, and that's our bad because we didn't feel rushed to go look at a hospital. We really only decided on the hospital we would be delivering maybe like 2 months before actually delivering. So, tip, as soon as you find out you're pregnant, maybe you should go check out the hospital you want to deliver at, or check out the different hospitals, um, just so you can be a little bit more prepared, or at least know where labor and delivery is. So, anyway, we get to the hospital. I didn't know that my husband couldn't go up with me because I wasn't being induced and I wasn't scheduled. Um, so I was bummed out and I was like anxious and like sad about that because I didn't want to be up there by myself, but I wasn't going to fight them on it. They took my temperature and they told him that he'd have to wait um, for me until I was for sure going to be admitted. So we were like, okay. So he decided to wait in the car. I go upstairs to labor and delivery, and I head to triage, and they fill out paperwork. So I think I was waiting for about like 15-25 minutes before they get me into a room. And I love the staff during my stay there, and they were really professional and helpful. But I did get irritated because I kept hearing,
"Oh, you're most likely going to be going home today."
and I was just praying like, I don't want to go home today. I'm going to be giving birth. I don't want to go through this, and I don't want to like guess whether or not I'll be giving birth. So it's happening today. Um, but yeah, so I kept hearing that. And I mean, I don't blame them because I'm pretty sure other hospitals say this to a lot of women. I didn't look like I was a woman in labor, and just the signs were kind of telling them like, oh, this woman's gonna be going home. So anyway, they get me in the room. I get dressed and I take a urine sample. um, Another nurse comes in. She asks me questions, says the doctor is going to be coming in. She's very observative and she notices that in my urine I have some blood, and she's like, have you been bleeding? And I'm like, not really, I had an episode of bloody show, but oh yeah, so whenever I go to use the restroom I bleed a little bit, but I thought that was normal. So she's like, huh, okay. So she finishes up and she's like, okay, they're going to confirm insurance, all this stuff. So they do that. And then she walks out. Um, After a few minutes, I'd probably say like a good 15 minutes or so, the doctor comes in with the nurse and he's like, oh, so you might be going home today because you don't look like a woman who's in labor. And he's really nice though. And I joke around and I'm like, Doc, you don't know this, but I have a really good pain tolerance. And he's like, good one, kid, good one. But he goes through the list and he's like, well, since you're going home today, I mean, you might be going home today. Da 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 da. Anyway, we get through with whatever he has to ask, and then he sends another nurse to go in to check my dilation. And at this point, I haven't been checked for my dilation, which is why I was irritated more so as to why people, I mean, I was irritated when people would tell me I would be going home because it's like, you didn't even check my dilation. Like, you don't know. Like, maybe I really do got high pain tolerance, you know? So the nurse comes in, she finally checks my cervix, which is at just a 2, I think, at this time. But because of the blood in my urine, that was suspicious to them. But she was like, I think you ruptured. So she does another thing and she's like, oh yeah, you definitely ruptured. So she's like, you're going to be admitted. And I'm like, yes. um, and so they try to get everything prepared as to like my room that I'll be admitted in. And they let my husband come up with all of our goodies. Um, Mind you, he also had his own hospital bag. So he gets in, we wait for another 25, 30 minutes until we get into the room that I'll be delivering in. So you guys saw this in the video if you watched that video, but I was hooked up to everything and I was scheduled for a vaginal delivery. So oh my gosh, it's crazy because you can prepare so much for your birthing plan, or you say like, oh, this is gonna happen and that's gonna happen, but until the day of, you really don't know. So, um, they start me on Pitocin because I wasn't dilated, but my water had already broke. And I think it had broke the night before. So, um, which is weird because I didn't even know it broke because it's nothing like the movies where a gush of water or whatever comes out your vajayjay. It was just like, I didn't even know. I was just like, no, my water broke. I don't know. um, so I'm there laying down, trying to be calm and peaceful, um, which for the most part I am, but a little anxious. I did not feel contractions. And when they started me on the Pitocin, I felt a little here and there, but not really. And Avea was very active. She was moving around a lot, which is something I didn't know. I thought that by the time you'd be delivering, baby would just be like still, but she was moving around a lot. Most especially when the contractions started to come. So I had a really traumatic birthing experience. I'm not trying to exaggerate anything, but they have the Pitocin going. They have me hooked up to the monitors. I keep using the restroom or feeling like I need to use the restroom. That it got to the point where my nurse was like, "Oh, like if you need to use the restroom, just I can change the padding on." And I'm just like, I guess. um, but they have me hooked onto the monitors, and there was a time, I think you can see it. I'm pretty sure my husband recorded it, but Avea's heart rate just started to go a little crazy, and you couldn't really hear the monitor anymore. So the nurses come in, and I didn't feel anything crazy or anything, but I knew one contraction was coming after another. And did I already have the anesthesia? I'm trying to think. Which, by the way, I was debating about whether or not I was going to get an epidural way before I went into the hospital. I wasn't too sure. I wasn't against it, but I just wasn't sure just because of things that I've heard, like, oh, it's going to mess up your back, it's going to make your memory worse, all this stuff. So I was just like, I don't know, if I really need it, then I'll get it. Which in the end, I ended up getting it, obviously. But I'm trying to remember if it was before or after that point. Yeah, I think it was before. No, it was after. So they had asked me if I wanted an epidural, and I'm not saying the nurse like was pushing me to get it, or I don't know if she could tell in the monitors that eventually would end up being like a C-section, but she's all like, "Oh, have you thought about the epidural?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna wait until I start to feel pain." And she's like, "Oh, okay." She's like, "It's totally your choice." Um, and I just kept asking her about it to the point where I was like, "You know what? I'll get it. Can you send the anesthesiologist in?" So she's like, "Okay." And the reason why I decided to get one was I didn't want to wait till the contractions would get worse because I knew they would get worse. And I was only at like dilated at 2. And I wasn't really feeling any pain, but I knew that eventually I would feel the contractions because they're going to be getting worse. And so, anyways, that, and I had asked her about pain medications, and she's like, "Well, we don't give any pain meds past 8 centimeters." And I was like, "Well, if I need to get to 10 and it's taking like forever already to like, for the centimeters to progress, then I don't want to wait." Um, so there was a time where I was like, "Okay, let them know I want an epidural." And then I changed my mind and I'm like, "Okay, well, I'll just wait till it gets worse." So the nurse goes, "Okay, well, that's okay because the anesthesiologist is in the operating room right now anyway." So I'm like, "Actually, I'll get the epidural," because I didn't want to wait till it got worse, and then I asked for it and he ends up being in the operating room again, and then I'd have to wait like another hour. So I was like, just let him know I want it. So they end up giving it to me. By the way, to me, I was very anxious about getting the epidural because of the things I've heard it hurt and stuff, whatever. My pain tolerance is quite high, but I was very anxious about the epidural. In the end, I think it was honestly like a 2 out of 10. Um, the epidural to me didn't really hurt. Um, yeah. So that's that. And my anesthesiologist was really cool. The nurse who was assisting me, she was very calm, relaxed. So I think that's what helped. And I didn't really move or anything. So the epidural went in just fine. But anyway, so they get the epidural in, they put the Pitocins, continuing, and I just noticed that a bunch of nurses start to come in eventually when the monitor stopped making noise. I thought I just had moved around too much, and my husband actually pointed out, he's like, "Oh, I don't really hear the monitor anymore. Did you move it or something?" So that main nurse came in, and then like a whole bunch of other nurses started to come in, and they were just like moving me around, just to try to get my daughter's heart rate to go back up, and then they put the oxygen. During this whole time they weren't telling me what was going on, but once they put the oxygen on me, I knew something was up just because of my nursing background. And for them to try to stay calm, not really tell me anything, I knew they were just trying to do what they needed to do. And with me being anxious, if they were to tell me what was really going on at that moment, I know that I would have been more anxious, which would have been just worse. So I do understand why they didn't really tell me what was going on, but it was still like a moment for me where I was scared, and just like my anxiety was like, climbing up there, because in that moment I couldn't do anything in order for my daughter's heart rate to get up, which was scary for me because I couldn't do anything. I just felt like not useless, but it was just scary because I didn't know whether or not that would have impacted her health or her delivery. So I try not to think bad things, but in that moment, it was just like kind of hard not to worry. So eventually, they get my heart or her heart rate up, and they stop the Pitocin. And the nurse just tells me that they need to stop it because my daughter isn't really liking one contraction after another. So she's like, let's just see how your body does with dilating on its own. Um, so they do that, and she asks me if I'm doing okay, and she's like, everything's gonna be okay. We're gonna take good care of you. I think she could tell that I was anxious, obviously. Like, how can a mom not be anxious with that kind of stuff going on? So she leaves, and I think she switches with another nurse. So another nurse comes in, introduces herself to me along with another nurse with her. I think she's like a new nurse. And they eventually check my dilation again, and at this point, I think I'm only like a 3 going till 4, and I think it's already been like an hour and a half, 2 hours that pass at this point. So yeah, I was taking a lot of time. So she checks me. She's like, okay, we're gonna start the Pitocin again. So she starts the Pitocin again, and she's like, do you want to try the peanut ball? It'll really help open up that cervix. It'll stretch it, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? We're gonna get this baby out today. Let's try it. So it's pretty much like an inflatable ball that looks like a peanut, and I put it in between my legs, and oh my gosh, yes, you can really feel like the stretch. So she's like, oh, do you feel it? I'm like, yeah, I definitely feel something. So it's quite crazy that this ball you can really feel a stretch. But I start to feel contractions, and it's weird because prior to that, I couldn't really feel my contractions, but this time I could feel it. It wasn't as painful, but I was thinking like, okay, if I have an epidural, why do these contractions? Like, why can I feel the contractions? And this is the really scary part where I
Thought I was gonna die, y'all.
and I was really compliant and cooperative before this point, but I just wasn't having it. I was like, can you
call a nurse? I can't breathe.
And he's like, are you sure you want me to call a nurse? And I'm like, yes, I can't breathe. So he's opens the door, and he's like, she needs help. So the nurse comes in, and she's like, is everything okay? And I'm like, no, I can't breathe. Like, obviously, why would I call her if I was okay? And she's like, well, your oxygen looks okay. The monitor says your oxygen saturation's doing well. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I can't breathe. So she's like, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. And like, all of a sudden, like, they're telling me to calm down. So I'm like, I'm trying to calm down. I'm trying to take deep breaths. And all of a sudden, my back just like cramps up. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know, I can't breathe. So the nurse ends up grabbing my oxygen because she's like, oh, shoot. And like a whole bunch of other nurses start coming in again. And this time, it was a little bit more scarier because of the amount of nurses that were in there, and just like everybody's just like, okay, honey, let's have you turn this way. Nothing's happening. Okay, let's turn you this way. And I knew something was going on again with my daughter. And the nurses were trying their best to keep me calm. But yeah, I knew, like, you just know that something's going on because, like, why would there be a bunch of nurses that just rush in here? And so they're trying to move me, and it's not really doing anything like it was the first time around. So now I'm just like, like, I'm just like, what do I do? So I was like frustrated, anxious, scared, and thank God my husband's like very calm, or he presents himself very well as being calm, but he's just there on the side, like, just, it's okay, you'll be okay, just take nice deep breaths. So eventually they finally get her heart rate going back up, and I already knew this was coming, but the another nurse comes in, and the doctor on call, I think, introduces herself and is like, oh, I'm going to be assisting your OB. And she tells me that it is going to be a C-section, emergency C-section, because obviously of what was going on. And I'm like, great. I really didn't want a C-section at all. So I'm praying, like, Lord, let everything be normal so that I don't have to do this C-section. And I was preparing myself for a vaginal delivery. I don't know. For some reason, I did think, though, that there possibly could be a reason for me to do, like, have a C-section. So I don't know if I put that into the world, or God was just like, listen here, you need to prepare yourself. But yeah, so she's telling me the risk involved, and then to sign the consent, and I'm just like, I don't want to do this, but really, do I have a choice? Because how else am I going to get this baby out? So I was like, okay, well, for baby, this is the best option, is for us to do the C-section anyway. So I'm just preparing my heart and my mind for the C-section now. And the other nurse, who gave me the peanut ball, she wasn't really for me getting the C-section, just because baby's heart rate was back to normal. And she's like, I don't think you need to get a C-section. Everybody just needs to calm down. So they get the Pitocin going again after shutting it off. And she's like, do you want to give the peanut ball another chance? So I'm like, I guess, like, if that's going to help get this baby out. So I try it again, and I was just really scared that whatever happened prior to was going to happen again. So I removed it, and I'm just like, whatever, I'm just going to take nice deep breaths and just try to calm myself down. Because what was happening was, it was an emergency section. Everything ended up being better, and so it wasn't a C-section. And then my OB gets in, and the nurse is like, oh, you know what? Everything with baby seems fine. She's fine. Mama's fine. I don't really think it's necessary to do the C-section. And so my OB's like, yeah, this baby's going to change her mind again. She's done it already. I think it's just best we go ahead and do the C-section. So again, a C-section. So I'm like, oh my gosh. But this time I'm just like, you know what? Do it. I just want to see my baby already. I just want this part to be over. It's so overwhelming for me, traumatic, and just, So they prepare me for the C-section. They already had my husband dressed down from the first time they said they were going to do the emergency section. And they get me prepared. They transfer me from the delivery room to the OR. Prior to that, the anesthesiologist comes back in with the medication, and oh my God, that is crazy stuff. So I work as a pre-op post-op nurse, and I worked in pain management, and we give our patients heavy medications, just for sedatives because they're getting injections for their pain, obviously. So they give them anesthesia, and a lot of the times they come out and they're like, oh, my legs are numb, like I can't feel them. And it was not till that day I knew what they were talking about. It is crazy. But with my nursing background, I wasn't freaking myself out too much, but it is pretty crazy. So anyways, the doctor puts in the medication, and I'm like, it's really warm, and I can just feel the warmth like all the way down to my legs. It's normal. And he's like, oh, if that's what you're feeling, perfectly fine. That's great. That's what it's supposed to do. And I did not like it at all. I think for the epidural, that was the part that I didn't like, was that sensation of me not being able to feel my legs. And it was just really heavy, and that warm sensation, it was not fun. So yeah, I think that was like one of the parts of the medication. But anyway, so my legs are numb, completely dead weight. They transfer me to the operating room, and I remember they were trying to transfer me, and I'm like, sorry, I can't really help you guys, can't feel my legs. And they're like, it's fine. So they transfer me over to the operating table. They put the drape over, and the doctor, I never met the OB that was delivering me till that day, because I was just seeing one of his associates, or the nurse practitioner that he works with. So yeah, but the doctor was pretty cool, and the nurses were awesome, and they were just really calm, and just, yeah, it was a good experience with that hospital. But they so now I'm numbed up, and my husband is there next to me talking to me, just trying to keep me calm. And they're like, okay, gonna get started now. So they make the cut slowly, and they asked me if I could feel it, and all I could feel was, I could kind of feel this, I could feel the sensation but no pain. So that kind of freaked me out a little bit. But they did their thing, and it went by pretty fast. But I just remember the assistant doctor was like, a lot of pressure here. So I feel her like pushing down, I guess, to get baby out. But it felt like it was near my rib, like kind of near my boob. And I'm like, whoa, what the heck? Like, that's not where the baby is. But a lot of sensation, and I'm just like, okay. Like, that part was quite discomforting. And my husband's just like, deep breaths, deep breaths. And I started to feel nauseated. So I'm like, doc, I feel a little nauseated. So he's like, okay, I'll give you something for that. And then, yep, eventually they get the baby out. I kind of freaked out a little bit, because from my clinical experience, I know that babies cry immediately after they're delivered, but obviously this is a C-section. So, but it was taking her some time to cry, so I was worried. I was like, is she not breathing? Is there a problem? Because you can't see anything, So eventually I hear her little cry, and I'm like, oh, thank God she's okay. And then they call my husband over to take photos and to cut the umbilical cord. And then they eventually bring baby girl to me to see, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's so cute. She's like a little Cabbage Patch Kid. And like, it was just amazing, because you see ultrasounds of the baby, and you kind of think like, oh, what's my baby gonna look like? And yeah, just seeing her, oh my gosh, she's like a little chubby wub. And then we were hoping she'd be chubby, or chunky. So they're like, oh my gosh, she's such a big baby, she's so cute, she's so beautiful. And yeah, and they get her cleaned up, and my husband and her go to the recovery room, and they finished stitching me up. And I remember just feeling nauseated, so the doctor had to give me medication again. And the doctor was just like, girl, she's like, you were all baby, because like, where'd your baby tummy go? And I'm like, don't play with me. But yeah, they get me finished, and bring me back to the recovery room where we do skin to skin and I get to spend time with baby. Yeah, so I just thank God that my recovery and my daughter's recovery, there were no complications, even if there were complications for labor, and we weren't really expecting that. But thank God, like, recovery has been honestly pretty good. For someone who had a C-section, a lot of people um, were like, "Wow, like you're up and moving that night." Um, the nurse was like, "Hey, we'll see if you can get up to like um, to get yourself cleaned up." And so I was able to do that. Um, thank God. And she's like, are you up for doing a few rounds, um, like around the station?" And I was like, I'm gonna try my best. The reason I didn't really like push myself, but the reason why I was hoping that it wouldn't be long for me to recover is because I knew that my husband wouldn't be with us at home long. So it would pretty much be myself, and having some help from my sister and my brother in law, because my mom was still stuck in the Philippines, which now she's here to help, thank goodness. But yeah, so I wasn't pushing myself to recover, but I knew there were requirements that I'd have to meet if I wanted to go home as well. So yeah, but the only thing I was concerned about was my incision, just because I didn't want to push myself to the point where they might open and I didn't want it to get infected. But other than that, yeah, Avea is now 1 month old. She is 2 weeks short of being 2 months, but she looks like she's like a 5 month old baby. She's the cutest thing. She's really chubby wubby. Um, but other than that, that is my birthing story. I am just curious how your birthing story went. Was it how you had planned a bit, or was it completely like, whoa, like a surprise, just like mine? I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.